From the East Texas Sports Network studios, powered by Texas Dairy Queen, a tradition of excellence, the ETSN podcast, where Clint Buckley and Mike Graham offer their, well, they just talk. But who really cares? It's what they do best. It's the lowdown on everything high school football in East Texas. And now, Clint Buckley and Mike Graham.
It's Thanksgiving week, and the high school football playoffs are in full swing in East Texas. After Saturday, we'll officially be halfway to state championship weekend in Houston. Welcome to this week's edition of the ETSN.fm podcast. I'm Clint Buckley, and I'm joined as always by Mike Graham. How's it going, Mike?
Yeah, excited to be here and talk about this stage of the playoffs. It's always fun because district opponents start turning back and cannibalizing each other. So that's always fun to see the rematches and see what teams learned and how they improved. And I'm excited in particular to talk about those games. Well,
there are 19 teams left from East Texas still alive in the playoffs, and boy, there's some big-time matchups going on this week. And I guess we'll start off with the big schools that are still alive in East Texas. And East Texas is going to be invading Jerry World Saturday, AT&T Stadium in Arlington. East Texas doubleheader of sorts, beating with Marshall against Frisco Lone Star at 10:30 a.m., and that'll be followed immediately by Longview versus Wylie at 2 p.m. I'm excited about these two games.
Yeah, I think that the two fan bases are going to be excited about them too. You know, they can either pull for each other or enjoy the fact that one of them might lose. I don't know. I'm sure it depends person to person, but what a heck of a treat for East Texas teams. Almost never do they get to go to NFL stadiums for normal non-state championship playoff games, and it's always a fun experience to put on your helmet and pretend you're, a big star.
Yeah, this is kind of a throwback because when I was growing up in East Texas, this happened quite a bit. Back at the old Texas Stadium, you'd have John Tyler and Longview would play a doubleheader, or John Tyler and Lee, Longview, Marshall. Sometimes they'd have a tripleheader of East Texas teams up at Texas Stadium, and it's nice to see that kind of return instead of having just DFW hog AT&T Stadium every week.
Exactly. It's a little bit of a drive and a little bit of sacrifice and mileage to go play the teams there. But it's definitely going to be fun, and I'm sure for a lot of people it's going to be their first experience at that stadium, and it's world class.
Yeah, and you know what? You can take care of your Black Friday shopping needs up there in the Metroplex and stay the night, and then watch a couple of football games on Saturday to kind of finish off your Thanksgiving weekend. It ought to be a lot of fun. Let's get to the matchups at hand, though. Marshall against Frisco Lone Star. We got two one-loss teams going at each other, and we've got two dynamic quarterbacks that are going to be going head-to-head, and Marshall's Cam Howler and Frisco Lone Star's Jason Shelley.
Yeah, we were just doing the research into them and looking at their numbers, and Cam Howler, leans toward the run, and Shelley leans toward the pass. So contradicting styles, but they're both dual-threat athletes, both very capable with their other facet. And in terms of total yardage, they're pretty much dead even.
Yeah, and I think there was a lot of trepidation after Justin Hart was injured. The starting quarterback for Marshall. At the beginning of the season, they weren't sure how much the passing game would be affected by that, but Howler's come in and he's done a nice job the last couple of weeks throwing the football.
Right, they lose to Texas High, and then they kind of walk over the bottom tier of District 15-5A. But since the playoffs have been going, his numbers have been very consistent. He 188 yards passing, and then 190 yards passing, and more than 100 yards rushing in each game, and that's exciting to see him develop. And of course, he'll be back next year.
Yeah, that's something that I'm sure head coach Clint Harper is awfully excited about, having Cam Howler coming back next year. But first things first, you got to finish up this year, and nobody wants to see the season end over there quite yet. I think the difference in this game is going to be Marshall's supporting cast, because just looking at the numbers, it seems like Marshall has more players around Howler, more playmakers than Shelley does at Lone Star.
That's right, and a lot of them are on the defensive side. And Antonio Washington, a defensive tackle, had a heck of a game. We'll get into him later. They've got a college prospect in Micah Smith at safety, and then a couple of good sophomores in their defensive backfield as well. And that's only the defense, because you look at their offense and they have another 1,000-yard rusher. Lone Star does not. They've got some good receivers. Obviously, Lone Star does, but if this defense can kind of clamp down on Shelley, I think that they've got a really good shot at advancing to the regionals and beyond.
Well, the next game on the schedule at AT&T Stadium is Longview against Wylie. I was awfully impressed with Longview last week. I thought that they might be an underdog going into the game, and those two teams, Longview and Mansfield Summit, were about as evenly matched as you could get. It really came down to mistakes in the kicking game from Summit. Longview was up 21-14 into the fourth quarter. Summit gets a touchdown early in the fourth. They miss the extra point. But then Summit has another chance late in the game. They get into field goal range with about 2.5 minutes to play. And then the kicker misses a 34-yard field goal. And Longview is able to survive and run out the clock after that. And it's been fun to watch Longview because these first two playoff games that they've had, I've been able to watch. It's been fun seeing their running game kind of wear down opposing defenses in the second half because their offense really didn't do that much in either of the first half of their two playoff games against Lufkin and then against Summit. But it's that continuing commitment to the running game, and in particular, the big backs like Tylen Miller and Austin Moore, the fullback, that have really been wearing down opposing defenses, and I think that's going to be a big challenge for Wylie this week.
I think so too. Wylie's kind of a finesse offense, and they can go, they're going to gain yardage, but at the same time, they're going to be moving fast and not utilizing a lot of clock. I mean, if Longview gets any kind of separation in this game, their running game can really make it difficult for Wylie to climb back because, one, it's effective, and two, it's going to take a lot of time off the clock, and I think clock management is going to be important for Longview to get the win out there.
And kind of an unsung development for Longview over the last couple of weeks has been how effective their defensive line has been. This isn't the biggest or maybe best talent-wise defensive line they've ever had. I talked to Brian Gilliland, their defensive end, their senior, last week after the game, and he even said, we're not the biggest D-line Longview's ever had. We're not the biggest D-line anyone's ever had. But he says that they're really focusing in practice week to week, and they're playing really well together. That three-man front with him and Kyrie and Sheridan on the other side, and then in the middle, Stacey Nelson at nose guard. They're getting a lot of pressure with just three guys, and that's big, especially this time of year when you don't have to send extra pass rushers against a team that likes to throw the ball. Now Wylie is a little more balanced than most teams, but it really came into play the first 2 weeks against Lufkin and Summit. They kind of took the passing game away from those two teams because of that good pass rush, and I think that could be a big key this week as well.
I think so too. And just going back to the defensive line, it's kind of what Longview prides itself on, overachieving, and yeah, they've definitely got some good players that are along that line. So I think that they're going to fare pretty well in this game, to be honest with you.
Maybe the most exciting matchup to me this week is Carthage against Navasota in 4A Division I. You want to talk about two state powers. I mean, these have been two of the best over the last decade or so. Carthage and Navasota have a combined 6 state championships since 2008. Navasota's on a long 28-game winning streak. They're the defending state champs. Ironically enough, their last loss came to Carthage in the 2013 playoffs in the area round. So Carthage has a chance to finish what it started, because Navasota hasn't lost since that game, and I'm sure Carthage would love to get back to playing for state championships, and this is a big game for them, because if they beat Navasota, not only will they be doing the rest of the state a gigantic favor, they'll be doing themselves a big one too, because I think a win over a Navasota team would give them supreme confidence and really set them apart from the rest of the field in 4A Division I.
And I really like this Carthage team. Quarterback Jared Blissett has really, really developed this season. He's a heck of a player. But then around him, just a lot of athleticism. Their defense is very strong. Really impressed with Gerard McClin at defensive end. I think that he might be in store for bigger offers. I think they've got some good matchups in this game, but of course they're going to have to defend some amazing Navasota athletes who already have a state championship experience under their belt.
Yeah, and state records. Trendavian Dixon became the state of Texas's all-time career touchdown receptions leader. I think he has 71 touchdown catches now in his career, which is just amazing. But Carthage has experience. They went up against a supreme receiving talent last week in Hezekiah Jones, who is a really good junior receiver from Stafford. Obviously, they didn't let him get off because Carthage's defense pitched a shutout in that game, 34-0. And I saw Carthage a couple of weeks ago in the first round against Bridge City, and their defense was really fun to watch. They were flying around to the football. They were really physical. And that's something that they've always prided themselves on under Coach Scott Surratt, as being more physical than the other team, and that's really showing up right now. And they're going to need that physicality against a really explosive Navasota offense that's averaging almost 60 points per game. So on to some of the East Texas versus East Texas matchups. We've got plenty of those, and I guess we'll start off with Gilmer versus Center. This is a game you'll be seeing Friday night at Tyler's Rose Stadium. This is very intriguing to me. What are your thoughts on this one?
Well, I'm excited to see Center because, one, I haven't seen them yet, and I know a lot about Octavius Evans, and quarterback Kyle Parks is very good. Kind of another one of those dual threats in the category of production of Cameron Holler and Shelley from Frisco Lone Star, and I'm excited to see what he can do against, probably the best pound-for-pound defense in Class 4A Division II. I mean, you look at what Gilmer's been able to do, bailing out their offense in the bi-district game and then just dominating Mejia last week. And Center's got some good athletes, and I think that this is going to be a game along the lines of the one that Gilmer had with Carthage in the non-district season.
Yeah, this could be kind of a low-scoring game. I saw Center in the regular season finale against Gladewater. Their defense, it says that the final score says that they gave up 38 points to Gladewater, but I was still very impressed. I know that sounds crazy. I was still very impressed with the athletes that they have on defense, and you mentioned who they have on offense. I mean, they're pretty loaded, and it's not just Octavius Evans at receiver or Kyle Parks at quarterback. They have a really strong running game led by a couple of two-way standouts that play both running back and linebacker. DeCorey McGee and Cedric Barnes are both very talented runners. And, this is very intriguing to me just because we're not sure what Gilmer team's going to show up. You saw the quote-unquote bad Gilmer the first week of the playoffs. What do they have, 7 turnovers?
7 turnovers.
Yeah, and it nearly cost them a shot at a back-to-back state championship. And they obviously can't do that this week against Center. Center's just too good of a team to make that many mistakes against, and I'm looking forward to it. I think this has the potential to be a very good game. We should see a really big crowd out at Rose Stadium.
That's what I'm most excited about, the turnout. You're gonna have a lot of people home for the holidays that still love Gilmer and Center football. I'm expecting near a packed house. I think that these two fan bases can do that.
Well, that's not the only East Texas versus East Texas matchup. There are 3 other ones, so 4 total, involving head-to-head matchups between teams from this area. And there's a Thanksgiving Day or Thanksgiving evening matchup between West Rusk and Paul Pewitt. That's going to take place at Lobo Stadium on Thursday in Longview. West Rusk and Paul Pewitt. They finished second in their district behind Hooks, but they have reeled off a couple of impressive back-to-back wins to begin the playoffs. They hung 55 points on Leonard last week and really just did whatever they wanted on offense, ran for over 400 yards, and then you got a West Rusk defense that you've seen in person that's pretty good, and this is going to be an interesting matchup between, I think, a really strong rushing attack from Paul Pewitt and a West Rusk defense that has played well really pretty much the whole season.
You're right. It's really going to come down to winning third down battles. Paul Pewitt's going to spend the game trying to get in position to convert, and West Rusk has a really good front and a really good secondary, all around a good, strong team. And I'm excited to learn about that one. Unfortunately, we won't be there. We've got family obligations that night. It's kind of interesting that this game was on Thanksgiving. Those games are incredibly rare. I know a lot of other states have Thanksgiving things, but you don't see a whole lot of that in Texas.
Yeah, I think Salina, back when G.A. Moore coached them back in the day, I think they used to like to play on Thanksgiving. And I remember West Rusk playing a Thanksgiving game maybe 6 or 7 years ago against ARP. And, I had heard that Paul Pewitt that's kind of a tradition that they like to carry, if they get that far in the playoffs every year, is to play on Thanksgiving. So it's intriguing. Unfortunately, neither one of us could be there, but we will have coverage of this game up on our website Thanksgiving night. So as you're trying to ward off the tryptophan coma that night after having seconds and thirds of turkey, you can kind of read up on how that game turned out. It should be a lot of fun. In that same region, we've got Wascom versus ARP, a district rematch.
Really interesting game. Obviously, Wascom won the regular season meeting 55-23, but that was ARP's last loss, and really from that point on, they were in the playoffs because they had to win each and every game just to get into the postseason. And since they got in, they've put up a couple of impressive wins. Yeah, I mean they've won 6 in a row. They had to win. Pretty much, they had to win all 4 of their remaining regular season games just to make the playoffs. Remember, they had that game against Frankston in Week 11 that was for the playoffs.
And then they've performed well since the playoffs began. They got a big win over Hooks in the first round, and then they took care of business last week over Lone Oak. So they're playing really well right now. It's obviously a different ARP team that Wascom will be facing this Friday, and it should be a lot of fun. And then one more East Texas versus East Texas matchup is Corrigan-Camden versus Crockett, another district rematch. This is interesting. This was another blowout in district, but who knows? Corrigan-Camden's coming off an awfully impressive performance last week.
Right, and Crockett's a team that loves to throw the ball. Quarterback and 2 receivers are among the highest in the passing and receiving categories. And Corrigan-Camden comes in with an offense that can kind of dictate the pace of the game. But responding to a 77-21 loss earlier in the season, I think, is going to be really tough for them.
Yeah, it's going to be a challenge, but the saying always goes, it's hard to beat a team twice in a season. So we'll see if that plays itself out this week.
Yeah, I really believe that when you look at the film, obviously when you're game planning, you want to see how your last game against that opponent played out, and I think that the winning team does not pull out nearly as much from the film as the losing team does. There are a ton of things you can correct, but you feel pretty good about yourself when you watch yourself making plays against an opponent you're about to play again.
Well, it's time to recognize our offensive and defensive players of the week, and congratulations are in order to our offensive player of the week, Lamont Hillis, a running back from Paul Pewitt. He is our offensive player of the week. He had 279 rushing yards and 5 touchdowns in their big 55-28 area round win over Leonard. And our defensive player of the week, you saw him in person Saturday, is Antonio Washington, a defensive tackle from Marshall.
Yeah, the second straight week I've gotten to see my defensive player of the week, and Antonio Washington. What an incredible first half against South Oak Cliff that really took that team out of the area round game and allowed Marshall to get a rematch win from last season's season-ending loss. 4 tackles for loss, a 5th when you factor in one of them was negated on a chop block penalty, plus a 9-yard sack, and really killed 2 drives as Marshall's offense was trying to find itself before reeling off 5 straight touchdowns.
And remember, he was our defensive line MVP from the ETSN Combine, and it's always nice to see us validated.
Yeah.
We chose him as our MVP that day, and look at the senior season he's had. He's had a great year.
He's starting to look like Dalen Mack. He's starting to do those things where he catches the quarterback and running back right in their starting spot. It's really a sight to see. I mean, I'm very interested to see what happens late in the recruiting game for him, because at this point in the playoffs, I think you can get a lot of exposure.
Exactly. Well, that's going to do it for this week's podcast. Be sure to check out ETSN.fm for the latest news and updates on the high school football playoffs. Of course, if you have any questions or comments, you can find us on Twitter. I'm at Clint Buckley, and Mike, you are at Mike_ETSN. I want to make sure I get that right. We'd like to wish everyone a very happy Thanksgiving and best of luck to all of the East Texas teams playing this weekend, and we will talk to you all next week.